Speaker, I would like you to pay attention to me because I'm speaking to you this afternoon.
Go right there, Honorable Member.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak, sir. I want to stand here this afternoon to say from the get-go that I will support anything that protects our Guyanese people, men, women, and children. I will support that. So I stand here this afternoon to support this bill. I am particularly happy that the Minister of Human Services read to us part of the legislation that speaks about regulations. I am of mixed emotions listening to the previous speaker. I am of mixed emotions. I don't know if to laugh or I don't know if I should cry. You know, the minister stood there and called out a few numbers of incidents and so on. But Mr. Speaker, the last time we heard from the Minister of Public Security, of Home Affairs, on numbers on trafficking, it was July of 2021. It was July of 2021, so the whole of 2022, nothing was done. I'm assuming nothing was done, so there was no report. And then in 2023, the minister stands here and open his smartphone and begin another smartphone and starts to pull out a few figures to throw at us. And I don't understand if that's the way the PBPC government operates. Mr. Speaker, this is a good piece of legislation. I support it. Wholeheartedly, I support it. But it is the manner in which things are being done. Let me now go to what I really intend to say. This afternoon, I support the bill combating of trafficking in persons, for which all purposes it's intended to provide more comprehensive measures to combat trafficking in person, synonymous with international best practices and changing socio-political needs, as the minister would have stated, the Minister of Human Services. I have said that I will lend my support to any action that protects our people. Human trafficking is an international crime which affects men, women, and children across the globe. And we here in Guyana have been grappling with this scourge for a long time. In 2004, in this House, we benefited from a few great political minds. That was the debate on the human trafficking bill. We benefited from some great political minds on this matter, some of whom are no longer with us today. And I want to make mention of one such political mind who left this National Assembly with a void that we have not seen anyone stepping up to fill. And that person is the late Deborah Backer. May God Almighty have mercy on her soul. Sir, as legislators with great political minds, we have a responsibility to not only bring the bills here and pass them, but to also commit to operationalizing and implementing the legislation. Mr. Speaker, any government or any minister who wants to champion the cause of combating human trafficking will first have to show care for the people. Because people who are trafficked are almost always from a vulnerable population. So no one would want to be trafficked. The Honorable Kwame Mackay, the Honorable Alyssa Charlie, or even the Honorable Indar. They won't know about the vulnerable population because they are not from any vulnerable group. Sir, the point is, people from vulnerable groups are more prone to be trafficked. Therefore, you must care to want to do something about the matter as serious as human trafficking. To do this, sir, the vulnerable population. To do this, sir, you have to care about the people. It is the people, our human resources, that is most precious to our country. And the question is, who in this government cares? Is it the Minister of Home Affairs who gives us willy-nilly statistics whenever he feels that he should throw out some numbers? But the legislation specifically says that the stats must be published. And my honorable colleague, Geeta Chandan, asked, where is the stats published? And those are the measuring points that we will come back to ask about. And sir, like I said, it is the implementation of the legislation. Sir, this is a good piece of legislation. Hard work, I'm sure, went into it. And I want to acknowledge those people who would have worked so hard on this legislation. It is the implementation that I really worry about. Is it the Minister of Home Affairs that care? Is it the Minister of Education, or is it the Minister of Health? Or is it the Minister of Human Services? Sir, while the nation awaits the answer on who cares, we are waiting on the Minister of Education to tell us something about the education advancement of the 8 suspected human trafficking cases involving the 12 children that were reported to the Ministry of Human Services and Social Security Trafficking in Persons Unit for the period August 2020 to April 2021. Sir, the bill is good and I support it, but these operational issues that the PPPC government cannot adequately address is worrisome, and the nation should know it is worrisome. It is their incompetence, sir, because it cannot be lack of funding. It can't be, sir. We are an oil-producing nation. Honorable Member Dr. Vindhya Prasad stressed in the 2021 national budget that it illustrates a concerted focus on meeting the needs of our women and other vulnerable groups. Further, in 2022, in the 2022 budget of the Ministry of Human Services, it reflected that the Child Care and Protection Agency has seen an increase in the subvention from 852 million to 955 million to ensure the safety and the development of all Ghana's children. Sir, were these children that I referred to, the 12 children, were these children taken care of by the Child Protection Agency? Did the Ministry of Education have an input? Are they in school, sir? From 2021 to now, the nation awaits an update. And this is the statistics and the reporting that I will refer to throughout my speech. It is important that we know what is happening. And I keep saying, it is a good piece of legislation. It's a good piece of paper that we can read, but it is the implementation where the problem is. Mr. Speaker, I have no doubt that the public servants are doing the best they can to provide the best service to the victims of human trafficking. But I don't think by any form the reporting to this nation is acceptable on this matter. And while I wrap my mind around the issue of reporting to the nation, I want to draw your attention to the kind of information that is being shared through the media, and that is the Minister of Social Services, through answers to questions asked the issue, when asked on the issue of human trafficking related to this House by answering questions, and she provided that statistical data was sourced from the Guyana Police Force. Now, nowhere could we find the data that the minister answered the questions and sent to us. Nowhere in the public domain can we find that information, save and except the answers provided to this House. During the reporting period, August 2020 to April 2021, a total number of 28 reports of suspected human trafficking were investigated by the Guyana Police Force. Sir, we have that in writing. It came through this House. And so we will hold the two ministers accountable to that. But there is no other statistics out there that we can verify that this was actually done. In July, a total of 42 females were trafficked for sexual exploitation. I believe either the Minister of Human Services or the Minister of Home Affairs made reference to this information. Mr. Speaker, my conclusion on looking at the answers submitted to us in July of 2021 on the matter of trafficking in persons, what the Minister of Home Affairs said in the media, and what is actually practiced are three different stories, and they don't add up. This nation deserves better. Mr. Speaker, we on this side believe in credible sources and credible information. And the reporting period and the data supplied by both ministers, they're not correlating. And that's a reflection of the relationship over on that side of the House. Sir, I would like to say that the ministers should be held accountable. And disinformation and misinformation should be something that ministers are held accountable for. We should not subject ourselves to that kind of action in this House. In view of all this information not being credible, Mr. Speaker, it brings to mind part 6 of the bill, bill number 6. In part, it says, this part deals with data collection and dissemination, and it entails collecting and periodically publishing statistical data on trafficking. Sir, I cannot emphasize much more than this, how important it is for us to collect the data and publish the data on an authentic source for all of us to have access to. Until we do that, we are subjected to what the theatrics of Minister Ben, standing up, pulling out his cell phone, and calling out some numbers from his head. That is what we will be subjected to unless this information is verified and published. So I'm saying all of this, and I want to endorse and say again that the bill is a good bill, but it is the implementation that is worrying. The information captured in Bill number 6 of 2023 was similarly captured in Act number 2 of 2005. And while it is the law today that the minister publishes the data on trafficking, we as a nation have to wait until perhaps the 30th of July of 2023, when we observe another World Trafficking Day. That's when we are going to get another set of information through the media. So that's not good enough. This is what we refer to as Jagabatish behavior of the PPPC government. It is the Jagabatish behavior of the PPPC government. Sir, I don't know if this kind of behavior will assist us in any way in maintaining the Tier 1 status that the APNU AFC would have worked so hard to ensure that we're at. I want to pause here to recognize the hard work of Honorable Valda Lawrence, Honorable Kemraj Ramjatan, and former Minister Amna Ali, and former Minister Simona Brooms. Those were the champions to ensure that we achieve the Tier 1 status. Sir, it is the enforcement that you speak about that we don't know about because you're not reporting on it. It is enforcement that helps us to achieve that status. Sir, the bill, when approved by us in this House, would be an indication that we are making efforts to eliminate human trafficking in Guyana. You know, sir, human trafficking, as we all know, is a complex issue that requires a multifaceted approach to address. And I want to pause here because I heard from the Minister of Human Services about stakeholders' engagement. And what I want to ask at this point in time, where is the private sector in the fight against human trafficking in this country? Where is the private sector? Perhaps in closing, the Minister of Human Services will tell us if they have a role to play in all of this. It's essential to strengthen laws and law enforcement efforts to identify, investigate, and prosecute offenders. Sir, don't we in this age of technology want to do this effectively? And I don't know if we will ever get to efficiency. But sir, I mean, can we not, at this point and stage of our country, incorporate the use of technology in the fight against human trafficking? And sir, I recognize that this might be an operational issue, or perhaps I'm preempting the content of the regulations. And I will continue to say that we cannot go for another 18 years without regulations, as we did with Bill number 2 of 2005. It would be a good thing for us to put the regulations in place. So according to Guyana Chronicle, the 31st of July, 2021, a sergeant of police reported, and the Guyana Chronicle would have captured it. She indicated that some methods used by traffickers during the pandemic are advertising via social media, private locations for party, escort services, and victims being delivered to homes of clients. Sir, all of this has happened while we were all grappling with the effects of COVID-19. Perhaps I'm preempting this conversation for the regulations at the right time. Should we not make technology a priority point in fighting the issue of human trafficking? But while we're here discussing this legislation, sir, let us understand that no mention of technology and the use of technology is going to help us in implementing the strategies taken from this legislation. But let us understand that the United Nations will be focusing this year on the role of technology as a tool that can both enable and impede human trafficking. They have said that, and I quote, with the global expansion in the use of technology, intensified by COVID-19 pandemic, and the shift of our everyday life to online platforms, the crime of human trafficking has conquered cyberspace. The internet and digital platforms offer traffickers numerous tools to recruit, exploit, and control victims, organize their transport and accommodation, advertise victims, and reach out to potential clients, communicate among perpetrators, and hide criminal proceeds. And all that with greater speed, cost effectiveness, and anonymity. Human trafficking is a business. And if those traffickers are using technology, then why not use the technology to your advantage to help us to end human trafficking in this country? Sir, perhaps, I'm not sure if the Honorable Nandalal is speaking on this bill, but I'm sure somebody's going to come and say, well, this is captured in the cybercrime legislation. And perhaps it is. But tell us why it slipped the mind of the Attorney General to ensure that technology can enable the crime fighting for human trafficking. Sir, allow me to say that technology is not always a bad thing in this case. In this case, the traffickers are using it as an opportunity to make money. But future success in eliminating human trafficking will depend on how the Ghana police force, the criminal justice system, and others can leverage technology in their responses, including by aiding investigations to shed light on the modus operandi of trafficking networks, enhancing prosecution through digital evidence to alleviate situations of victims in criminal proceedings, and providing support services to survivors. You know, Mr. Speaker, this issue of human trafficking is serious. I will quote the Guyana Chronicle, the PPP state media. It says that Minister Ben explained that one of the problems with trafficking in person is that it relates to other criminal activities, such as the drug trade, money laundering, smuggling of gold, and other items out of the country, illegal trading of firearms, and other criminal activities. And Minister Ben himself actually just captured a little bit of that. It looks like he goes around talking this thing like a mantra. Said that in July of 2021, you know, I quote the Chronicle, he just said it again in May of 2023. Mr. Speaker, what the honorable member did not say is how he intends to ensure that this entire ring of what he calls illegal trading of firearms and so on, these criminal activities, how is he going to put systems in place to ensure that it spill off into human trafficking or the ring of human trafficking is broken? How? I heard my colleague Gita Chandan asking repeatedly for your crime plan. I've heard Kemraj Ramdatan, the honorable member, ask for the crime plan. If we know, we would not be raising these matters here. But this is the place to raise it, sir. Mr. Speaker, two other areas of importance I want to touch on. That is the support of our victims. Mr. Speaker, I am so sorry that I'm able to disturb the Honorable Robeson Ben that he will leave the House for the second time. I sat here and I listened to you mumbled figures. You should do the same thing. Listen. Mr. Speaker, I want to touch on two other issues before I leave the podium, and that is support for our victims. With over $40+ billion allocated to the Ministry of Human Services in 2023, similar sums in 2022 and 2021. These sums were provided through budgetary allocations to the Ministry of Human Services. Could we as a nation not care for the vulnerable population, establish at least 2 other shelters? And I heard my colleague Dineshwar Jaipashad made that call earlier. Could we not ask for 2 other shelters in the interior area? And I would suggest Region 7 and Region 8. At the moment, it is what the Minister of Human Services has labeled them, sir. If you were aware, she provided information in the questions asked to this house to each one of us. And you would know that she called them shelters. At the moment, yes, perhaps, AG, you can change that. At the moment, there are 5 active operational shelters across Guyana, as my colleague would have mentioned, that caters to the needs of victims of human trafficking. Could we not tell the people of Region 7 that in creating better infrastructure for your society, we will keep the indigenous women and their children safe? We will build a shelter in Bartico so we can bring the victims out of places like Isano Landing and other high-risk areas. Can we not say that to them, sir? Because funding is not the issue. Sir, as I talk about the shelters for the victims, especially women and children, I want all of Ghana to understand that dealing with victims of human trafficking can be overwhelming at the least. In preparing for this presentation, I decided to call 2 NGOs and a few professionals to get the real situation as it is on the ground. Coming out of that, I'm cognizant that trafficking can have significant physical and mental health consequences for victims, including injuries from violence, sexual and reproductive health problems, infectious diseases, malnutrition, and mental health conditions such as depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress disorder. Trafficking can have significant health consequences for victims, and it is essential to provide survivors with access to comprehensive health and social support services. Perhaps someone might want to stand up and say, yes, they are receiving psychosocial therapy, especially since the mental health bill was passed. Mr. Speaker, again, the bill is a good bill. It gives the authority to the Minister of Health to do a lot of things, especially providing necessary assistance for the victims. But in reality, is it being done? Let's take a recent example. And I want to talk about the psychosocial support for women. Let's take a recent example of the government providing psychosocial support for its citizens because they care, right? That's what they say. They have a slogan, because we care. Where is Priya? Honorable member, because we care. That's what they say. Can you imagine in a community that is 1.5-hour drive outside of Georgetown, there is no resident psychiatrist or psychologist. However, the psychiatrist visits the hospital once per month, sees patients for the whole day, a whole long line of patients sitting down to wait one day to see the psychiatrist. Once per month, the psychiatrist leaves Georgetown and go to that community. Sir, the reality is this is happening in Linden in Region 10. How could they begin to even tell the people of Region 10 and Linden that they care? One psychiatrist leaves Georgetown to go to Linden Hospital once per month. That is not enough, sir. That's not enough bruises. You know what happened? When the psychiatrist sees the patient, the psychiatrist refers the patient to Georgetown Public Hospital to see the psychologist. Honorable Nandalal, I have been working with the teachers in Region 10, and I'm talking about victims of domestic violence. I have been working the public system in Linden. We are talking about psychosocial support for our teachers.
Honorable member, you've just gone 1 minute over your 30 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the honorable member be given 15 minutes to complete her presentation.
Honorable members, the question is the honorable member be given 15 minutes to complete her presentation. See no objection? You may continue.
She's entitled to it.
Sir, am I not?
Honorable member, I don't know what Mr. Mahipal is shouting she's in. You're not entitled. You may be given with the leave of the assembly. So
Thank you,
I don't
sir.
know if you've already rewritten the standing orders, but if you have and it's approved, please pass them to me.
Thank you, sir. I know you have been gracious to Priya to accommodate her vote, and you will be gracious in giving me some time to wrap up. Thank you, sir. Sir, if we want, let me put away this script. If we want, as Guyanese, as legislators, if we are serious about combating trafficking of persons in this country, we absolutely have to care for the victims. We have to care about them. We have to demonstrate that we care for them. And the example of one psychiatrist leaving Georgetown to go to Linden one day of the month and referring patients to come to Georgetown to see the psychologist where they have to bear the burden of traveling and food and everything is ridiculous. It is ridiculous. You tell me what kind of psychosocial support is provided for the victims in Region 7, Region 8. Tell me about that. Tell me about what systems are in place. Where is the national plan for trafficking in persons? What have we been doing with public education? It's just gone. You don't see that anymore, not even on NCN. You don't see that anymore. It is very serious, sir. And so while I wrap up, Mr. Speaker, I want to say to you that the legislation is a good piece of legislation, and I thank the persons who would have worked on it to give us this. The problem is in implementing the legislation. The problem is we have to go to regulations ASAP to get it in. How do we distribute our resources equitably to ensure that our women and children benefit from the resources of this country? So nobody should suffer in the state that victims suffer under human trafficking. I stand to say that I support this bill, and I would like to see the regulations come as soon as possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Member. And now for the Honorable Minister of Amerindian Affairs, Ms. Pauline Sukhai.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I stand before this House to render my unwavering support for the Combating of Trafficking in Persons Bill, number 6 of 2023. Dr. Vindi Prasad, Minister